2020 Writers Symposium.
Young buck, buck wild, buck shots, buck town, slave buck, make buck, black buck, buck now. B-U-C-K. The word buck is razor sharp, yet powerfully expansive. A word of 4 letters that expresses a multitude of meanings. To be a hellraiser, to be rebellious, to be wild and out of control, to be young and black. M.K. Asante's memoir, Buck, uncovers the beautiful complexity of what it means to be a young buck in America. Buck chronicles M.K.'s tumultuous teenage years living in North Philadelphia against the backdrop of familial strife and street violence. In this coming-of-age story, readers follow M.K.'s growth in every facet of his identity, as a son, brother, friend, and writer. M.K. survived in the face of impossible circumstances, the death of his best friend, the incarceration of his older brother, his strained familial situation, and more. Eventually, he found his passion in the written word, to which he attributes to transforming the trajectory of his life and his perspective on education. His passion propelled him to a successful career in literature, filmmaking, music, and higher education. M.K. Asante is an acclaimed author of the books Like Water Running Off My Back, It's Bigger Than Hip Hop, and most notably his memoir, Buck. Additionally, Asante has made significant strides in the documentation of the African American experience with its documentaries, The Black Candle, which examines the cultural significance of Kwanzaa, and 500 Years Later, which studies the socioeconomic impact of slavery throughout history. MK also explores the interconnectedness of art forms with his debut music project, an original soundtrack inspired by his book, Buck. After graduating from both Lafayette College and UCLA, MK became the youngest professor ever to receive tenure at Morgan State University. To quote MK Asante, "Books show the world not just as it is, but as it could be, should be. They connect me to everything that has ever happened and to everyone who has ever lived." Although my upbringing differs greatly from MK's, I felt a meaningful connection to his perspective. His frustrations for the present and his fears and hopes for the future speak to me and feel like universal truths. When reading Buck, his love for his city is palpable, shown through his portrayal of the vibrant personalities that inhabit it. I love that MK devotes his multifaceted art to the voiceless, the incarcerated, the disenfranchised, the overlooked and judged. I believe his efforts to empower the marginalized through his art make him one of the greatest advocates of our generation. Please join me in welcoming MK Asante to the stage.
I've been introduced in many different languages, but that was one of the best introductions I've ever received, so. Now, I don't know why I walked over here as if I'm gonna stay over here. You know, I'm the kind of person, they said I had, what is that, ADHD? They said I had a hard time being in one place, and that's definitely, they're right about that. But how you guys doing today? That's what's up, that's what's up. You guys doing all right? Everybody good? So I'm happy to be here. I didn't know if I was gonna make it here. It's crazy. But it's good to be here. You know, thanks again for the introduction. Thanks again. Where's Mr. Armstrong at? Okay, I like how you did that. That was so gangster. You just, you see how you said one line and then just dipped. That was great. But no, thank you for you know. No, that's how the OGs do it, you know what I mean? That's the OG move right there, but I appreciate you for founding this symposium, this Writers Symposium. It means a lot to me and other writers that have come through here, I'm sure, and all the aspiring writers and readers, so thank you. young buck, buck wild, buck shots, buck town, slave buck, black buck, make buck, buck now. We talked about this earlier. She was like, oh, should I do it? Because you're gonna do it. But I said, no, you did it great. I like the way you did it because you really, you gave us some time to think about each word. And buck is so important to me. You know, I'm gonna talk a little bit about buck today. Buck is obviously my memoir, young buck, buck wild, buck shots, buck town, slave buck, black buck, make buck, buck now. How did I get this? I was relentless, comments and mentions, bottomless pensions, uptown Killer Dale riding with henchmen, or down Puerto Rican land copping the system. Benjamin Rush, we rumble like henchmen. You can't see us but still feel us like tension. You know, you'll notice in a lot of the conversation that I have today, especially like if I do lyrics, you'll notice if you've read Buck that I'm talking about things straight out of my experience. You know, when I say Benjamin Rush, we rumble like henchmen, you'll remember Benjamin Rush was the school that I went to. And the school where I saw a lot of chaos and really shaped my understanding of education to some extent, or at least of school. I want to talk about why I wrote Buck and why I do a lot of the things I do, whether it's in filmmaking, music, academia, you know, literature. It's basically a mantra that I have, and I'll tell you how I came up with the mantra first. So, like I said, I've traveled to a lot of different places. I've been fortunate enough to speak in a lot of different environments, universities, you know, in different, you know, schools, all different levels, right? From kindergarten to, you know, graduate schools, from the smallest universities in a country like Lesotho or Swaziland to, you know, places like Harvard or Stanford or something. So just lots of different experiences. But some of the most profound experiences I've had in my journey have been in just the most unexpected places. And that's what I find in life, that, you know, the most unexpected places you find the gems sometimes, you know. And the experience I want to tell you about now, it happened in a prison. I was in a prison. I wasn't incarcerated, but I was in a prison doing a writing workshop, right? And I'm in this writing workshop, and you know, I always get whenever I go into prison, I go into a lot of prisons and I go into a lot of juvenile facilities, and I'm always a little bit nervous, you know what I mean, before I go in. Not nervous like how I was nervous today. I was nervous today for other reasons. That's a different, that's a different subject. But no, I'm always a little nervous before I go into prison because you never know what to expect. I mean, you've always heard certain things about prison, and you know, so you never know what to expect. But I'm always blown away when I'm in the prison because, you know, the inmates that I work with they always have so many jewels to give me. And they always dispel so many of the stereotypes or myths that we might have about inmates or whatever. So it definitely, even though I'm usually nervous a little bit, I'm just nervous because I don't know what to expect. You know what I mean? And then when I go in there, it's just such a different story, and it's always like enlightening and, you know, really warm. In fact, the last time I was in a juvenile facility not too long ago, and I walked in, and the dude was like, "Yo," and I was like, "Sup?" He was like, "Did you write Buck?" And I didn't know whether I should say yeah or no. I didn't know. Like, it depends. Who's asking? You know what I'm saying? So he was like, I was like, "Yeah." He was like, "Yo, what's up, my man?" And he was like, he really loved it or whatever. And we started talking about it, and we, you know. But I always, you know, I'm just a little, you know, like when you walk into environments where you don't know what to expect, sometimes you get a little bit nervous, you know, because you don't know what's coming. But I'm in this prison, and this brother named Jordan, he's such an amazing writer. He's one of the best writers that I've ever worked with, especially like in a writing workshop scenario. You know, he was just eloquent and, you know, passionate, and his wordplay was amazing. He's just really an amazing writer. And I remember being struck by how powerful his words are. So at the end of our writing session, I was able to see where he spent the bulk of his days and nights. Like, I was able to go to the cell block where the prisoners, where they lived, where they stayed, they slept. And so I remember walking to Jordan's cell. You know, I'm walking along the cells, I'm seeing the different cells that everybody has. It's very depressing, you know, in a lot of ways, but at the same time, I'm just taking it in. I'm trying to be positive and, be upbeat. And I see Jordan's cell. When I get to Jordan's cell, I notice that his cell looks different than all the other cells that I just saw. So I'm like, I do a double take, try to figure it out. Triple take. You know what I'm saying? Quadruple take. Trying to figure out what's different. What's it called if you do it 5 times? That take. Exactly. I did that. Did that. Yep. 5 times. What is it again? Exactly. Did that 5 times, and then I saw, finally, it occurred to me what was different. This stage is kind of dangerous, just so you guys know. Because the way the yellow and then the black, I feel like, just see, I set it on camera just in case I slip. You know what I mean? Y'all know this is a setup. But so the thing is, right? I finally realized what's different about Jordan's cell, and I immediately get pissed off, like straight up angry, because I'm like, this brother, he's an amazing writer. He's powerful. He's eloquent. He's fiery. He's passionate. He's devoted, committed to the craft. And here, this prison has tried to dehumanize him. There's so many dehumanizing things that happen. And I saw Jordan's cell, and I realized what was different about his cell, and I got enraged. I realized that he didn't have a bed. And it made me upset. Because, like I said, here's this brilliant brother who is being denied the basic human right of even having a bed. And so I got upset. I didn't know whether I could do anything about it or not, if I could change anything, but I wanted to go talk to the warden or talk to somebody and figure it out. So Jordan noticed that I was upset, noticed what I was noticing, that he didn't have a bed. And he laughed at me, and he kind of showed me that underneath his bunk, he had this little flimsy mattress, which was his bed. And he said, no, I got this, I got a bed. He said, I just don't sleep on it. So now I'm like thoroughly confused. You know what I mean? Like, you have a bed, but you don't sleep on it. So my first question was, well, what do you sleep on? He said, I sleep on the floor. I sleep on the steel frame. I sleep against the wall. Anything but not against that bed. Not on that bed. What you got beef with the bed for? I'm just confused, you know what I mean? What did the bed do to you? Like, confusion. So I asked him, I'm a writer. And that's the thing about being a writer, right? How many people in here are writers? Aspiring writers, gonna be writers, working on it. No, I want to do it again. How many people are gonna be writers or working or on their way to be writers? Just show a hand. Okay, all right. See, the writers are just like this, But I feel like there's more writers. Sometimes you don't even know that you're a writer yet. Like part of the story I'm gonna tell you today, I had no idea. You know what I mean? That I would be here with this. It's amazing. So anyway, so Jordan, I said to him, yo man, what you got? What's wrong with the bed? So his eyes grow with disquiet, intensity. He gets closer to me. He says, MK, I don't sleep on that bed because I can't trust any kind of comfort in a place like this. He said, any kind of comfort in a place like this can numb you to the reality of where you really are and why. And so for him, sleeping on the floor, sleeping against the wall, against the frame, all of those things reminded him in that raspy voice of reality where he really was and why. And that was incredibly deep for me because I never obviously thought about it like that. And it took me a while to process what he was really saying. One of the things I write about in here, in my book, Buck, is, you know, my brother being incarcerated when I was growing up. And so I have history with, you know, the criminal injustice system, but I never thought about what this guy was telling me, Jordan, in this way, and I never thought about what he was doing personally to kind of keep his mind stayed on freedom. And so I started to think about what he was doing, right? He didn't want to be so comfortable in this place. And I started to think about how when we are comfortable sometimes, we can be too comfortable, we kind of forget what's going on. We're not aware of what's going on because we're good, we're comfortable. So we don't know or care or seek to understand what's happening around us, right? And I think that's a very dangerous place. And so what Jordan was doing was to make sure that he didn't get too comfortable, right? And so I started to think about, okay, I'm an artist. How do I apply this idea to art? And one of the ideas that I came up with was, okay, that's what I decided, shortly after leaving that prison, that's what I wanted, that's what the job of art was to do, was to snatch the mattress from underneath our slumbering selves and reveal to us where we are and what's going on. And I started to think about all the art that's impacted my life, all the amazing art that's impacted my life, and how it did that, I remember I read this book called Asante. Everybody heard of it? Asante? It's an amazing book. It's one of the best books I've ever read. It's written by this lady named Asante Shakur. You heard of Tupac? Mm-hmm. Okay, well, Tupac's godmom, Asante Shakur. If you think Tupac was tough, wait till you hear about his godmom. No, seriously, she's a whole nother level. But how did I find out about Asante Shakur? I found out about Asante Shakur through a song by Common called Song for Asante. This is for Asante. Now, please destroy that. Don't show Common that, but it's an amazing song where he tells a story about this woman named Asante, and I didn't know who she was until I heard this song, and then the song, I'm like, oh, who is she? And then I researched her, and then I found that she's got a book, and then I ordered the book, and the book changed my life. So again, art lets us know what's happening right here, even things that, Asante, her story unfolded in New Jersey, and I'm from Philly, so that's like literally right up the road. Anybody from New Jersey in here? Okay, only one person? Okay. I'm about to say something bad about New Jersey, but I just want to make sure there wasn't a lot of people from New Jersey in here. If there's like 50 of y'all, then I might have to rephrase it. But no, it happened right there in Jersey, and that's like literally just a hop, skip, and a jump from me. You want to know what I was going to say about Jersey? Everybody's like, what is he going to talk about Jersey? No, I'm from Philly, my family's from New York, so we always just say Jersey's just like, the place in between. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't have its own identity. It's just the place between Philly and New York. That's what we say about Jersey. Sorry about that, man. But that's what art does, right? And so when I thought of that, I began to say, okay, so what do I do as an artist? And for me, the way to take what I learned in the prison and to apply it to what I do as an artist is to come up with this mantra that I have. The mantra is, if you make an observation, you have an obligation. Observation equals obligation. If I make an observation, I have an obligation. It even rhymes. I like things that rhyme. I like hip hop, you know what I mean? Just rhyming, it just makes it easier, But observation, see what I'm saying? If it was like observation, meditation, that's still a rhyme. But if it was like observation, and give me another one that doesn't rhyme. Speaker, exactly. You would never remember that. Observation, speaker, like that doesn't even make sense. Observation, Exactly. So an observation really is the equivalent of an obligation. That's how I try to inform my life and my art, right? So I'm walking down the street, let's say my street. I'm walking down my street, I notice there's some trash on my street. That's an observation. You know what I'm saying? Like, pick it up, man. Like, you see it. Like, and I feel like we can apply that idea to so much of what we do, right? Not just in art, but in so many things. You make an observation, you have an obligation. We just heard from, Mr. Armstrong, very briefly, but we heard from him. But clearly this is a man who transformed an observation into an obligation. Something needed to be here, a writing symposium, right? And so now it is, because someone transformed an observation into an obligation. I was hearing about the BSU. You were telling me about the BSU earlier. You said it's real serious. Is the founder, is he here?
Is Ajala here?
And he's the founder though, right? Look, he's busy. I'm not trying to say, there's a lot going on in the world. I get it. But again, you made an observation, right? You guys made an observation collectively that something needed to happen, that there needed to be this organization, and it wasn't enough to just observe it, you had to actually create it, right? And that was your obligation. And so what I've tried to do in my life is transform those observations into obligations. And coming from the African American experience, there's a long history of that, right? Harriet Tubman, who recently there was a movie about her, but Harriet Tubman was enslaved, okay? This was a woman that was born into slavery. We don't talk a lot about slavery in this country, but obviously slavery in this country lasted for hundreds and hundreds of years. And she was born into slavery. She made an observation. Her observation was that her people were in bondage, they were in captivity, they were in slavery. And so she risked her life, her livelihood, everything to get her people free. She even said something that I think was interesting and kind of goes back to what we were talking about with the prison thing, right? Harriet Tubman said she freed 1,000 slaves. She said, but I could have freed 1,000 more if only they knew that they were slaves. And that's so deep because, we think about slavery or we think about these things and we don't realize the psychological, the mental effects of these things, right? It's not just physical captivity, but it's the idea that you even know that you are a prisoner, right? That's what I loved about that movie, The Matrix, right? It's like, you don't even know that you're in the Matrix. You know what I mean? You just think you're eating steak or whatever. But the idea that do you even know what's going on around you, right? And that's the whole idea of observation, obligation. Harriet Tubman made an observation, obligation. Oscar Michaud, the first African-American filmmaker in this country, transformed observations into obligations. His observation was basically that film was only being used to degrade and denigrate black people in the early part, when film was created in the early 20th century. And so his job was to go out and make films. His obligation was to go out and make films. Obviously, Hollywood didn't give him money to make a film. Obviously, Hollywood didn't distribute his movies, didn't endorse what he was doing in any way, right? So, but he had to go out and do this, and he ended up making like 40-something films depicting positive images of black life. And again, this is an obligation. This is something that you have to do. And so similarly, with me, the movie that you mentioned in the bio, the Black Candle, I made that movie with Maya Angelou. And I remember when I was walking with Dr. Angelou she had a sculpture garden in her house, outside of her house. And we were walking in the sculpture garden, and she told me, she said, we must make this film. And the idea, again, of must, the obligation to do something, right? The obligation to tell these stories. You talked about being a voice for the voiceless. That's something that I have to do. It's not even a choice. I have to speak for my brothers and sisters that aren't here to speak right now. That can't, for whatever reason. You talked about my best friend who got murdered. You know, I'm here representing him. I'm here representing people that are incarcerated. I'm here representing people that don't have a chance to speak to you, don't have a chance to travel, don't have a chance to see the world, who are still fighting for that opportunity. So that's something that I hold dearly. So thank you for mentioning that. But that observation, obligation idea is something I shared with Dr. Angelo, and it's something that inspired Buck. You know, when you think about Buck, you think about all these different terms, whether it's young buck, buck wild, buckshot. That's why I said that, right? It's all these different ideas in Buck. But I knew I needed to write something, and I needed to be honest about my life, because I knew when we're honest about our own lives, it inspires others to be honest about their life and inspires other people to improve. And so I had this story that I knew I wanted to share with you, but there were just so many things blocking it. First, I want to talk to you a little bit about what that story is. Okay, cool. I want to tell you a little bit about what that story is. So I was raised in Philadelphia, and I'll give you a little, how many people have read Buck in here? Oh, okay. So what do you guys, like the seniors? Yeah. Okay. It ain't let the young bucks read it yet. You know what I mean? You gotta wait a couple years so you graduate to this. But I wanted to introduce people to the world that I grew up in, which in so many ways is a different world, but also there's so many similarities, you know, and that's what Maya Angelou taught me. Dr. Maya Angelou, how many people are familiar with Dr. Maya Angelou? Okay, great. Well, Dr. Maya Angelou was a mentor of mine, and one of the things she taught me was that when you tell the truth, it connects with everybody. And, you know, even people who you've never seen, you've never met, places you've never been, you know, and she said, just tell the truth, you know, just focus on telling your truth. And so with Buck, I wanted to tell my truth, talk about where I came from, my journey. Like I said, I grew up in Philadelphia. Philadelphia is a very unique place. Anybody from Philly in here? You from Philly? That's what's up. That's what's up. Okay. So you got my back if anything jumps off. Okay, so in Philly, you know, everywhere, whenever you introduce people to a world, you have to introduce people not just to the world, but to the language of that world, right? And so for me, it was important to introduce you guys to Philly, where I'm from, and also introduce you guys to the language of where I'm from. So for example, we have this word in Philly. I'll read it for you, and then we'll talk about it. So this is the opening of Buck, for those who haven't read it. The fall in Philadelphia. Outside is the color of cornbread and blood. Change hangs in the air like the snakes on the live wires behind my crib. Me and my big brother Uzi in the kitchen. He's rolling a blunt on top of the source. The one with Tyson on the cover, rocking a kufi, ice grilling through the gloss. Uzi can roll a blunt with his eyes closed. He cracks, splits, and busts. The rawest crews in Philly are all three letters, he tells me. I read the cover through the tobacco guts and weed flakes. The rebirth of Mike Tyson. I'm not good, I'm not bad, I'm just trying to survive in this world. Awaken crews in a rude fashion, on the ass like Mike Tyson had a beauty passion. I do this. I spit lyrics to songs under my breath all day, every day. The bars just jump out of me no matter where I am or what I'm doing. It's like I got hip-hop Tourette's. So in this opening scene, Uzi, how many people got hip-hop Tourette's, by the way? You a little bit? Just one person? Let me give you the official diagnosis. Hip-hop Tourette's is when, at any given time, a chorus or a bar or several bars of lyrics, hip-hop, might just jump out. You could be doing homework, you could be talking to someone, you could be on the phone, you could be doing whatever, and then a bar would just jump out. So now I want to know how many people got hip-hop Tourette's. Okay, that's a little bit more. You know, because, I mean, really it's the nature of repetition, right? Whenever you hear something repeated, I mean, you're going to, you know, eventually it'll kind of get in you. You ever repeat a song that you don't even like? I hate when that happens. You know, you listen to the radio or something, then the song gets in your head, and then next thing you know, I got songs in my head. You know, I have a daughter, she's 3 years old, and she really likes Moana. True story. So I walk around with Moana songs in my head all the time. I know every song, I know them by heart. You know? You guys like You're Welcome? You like that one? I love You're Welcome. That's my joint right now. So anyway, it's a really good song. They even has a little hip hop part in there. You know what I'm talking about? Anyway, okay. Back to the mean streets of Philly. It's life. All right. So that's Hip Hop Tourette's. In this opening, as my brother's rolling the blunt and everything, I say folds, rolls, and tucks. Uzi rolls another perfect blunt. John looks like a paintbrush. My editor sends me a message. He says, MK, I love the book. I just have one question for you. You know, what is this John that you're talking about throughout this book? I use this word, J-A-W-N. And so I explain it in the book. John, it's a Philly thing, but John can mean anything, person, place, or thing. Sometimes if we're telling a story and we don't want people to know what we're talking about, we'll plug John in for everything. Yo, the other day I was at the John around the corner with the young John from down the street, right? We get to the John, right? And the boy at the door, all on this John, not knowing I had that John on me, man. It was about to be on in that John. And so that's like a great example of, you know, the way that we use language, the contextual, it's several things going on in that, in the word John, right? Obviously it's a Philadelphia thing, it's regional, it's something that comes from Philadelphia, but also something that speaks to a larger black experience. And when I say a larger black experience, I'm talking about black people came to America, African Americans, from Africa, but from many, many different ethnic groups and cultures. In fact, me and Fifi Lou were just talking earlier about how her family has Yoruba origins, and my family, which is African American, we did our African ancestry test, and we got Yoruba, so we could be like, you know what I mean, cousins or something. So, you know what I mean? Like, and so there's this, but the thing is, I've been to Nigeria, and the thing that's crazy about Nigeria is, or not crazy, beautiful, is there's 500 languages in Nigeria. In one country, there's 500 languages. So you're talking about, when we think about Africa, sometimes we think about it as a monolith, as one place, you know? But you gotta understand, I mean, this place has so much diversity within Africa. Different cultures, different languages, different everything, right? Just because it's the same continent doesn't, you know, think about the diversity of Europe, right? You know, all the different peoples in Europe. It's a continent, right? So you got all these different people who don't speak the same language coming to America and having to learn the same language, but learning it from people that are enslaving them, right? So the common denominator of language becomes English. I may speak Hausa, you may speak Fulani, you may speak Yoruba. These are all African languages, right? You may speak Tree, you may speak all these different African languages, but we come to America, you know, in the early 1600s, and we're forced to learn English because that is the language of the oppressor. That is the language of those that are oppressing you. That is the language that they want you to learn so that you can know how to follow instructions or follow directions, right? Basic language, English language skills. But they don't want you to read. Reading was illegal, right? So enslaved Africans couldn't read, but you could learn basic English so that you could at least follow directions, right? So I say all that to say in context that African Americans had to very quickly learn how to freak the language. And when I say freak the language, I mean, you know, you've heard the rap song Run DMC where they say, not bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good. Well, that means we're freaking the language, meaning in order for African Americans to exist in America on the plantation, but at the same time have Harriet Tubman, a woman who is actively trying to escape the plantation and helping others escape the plantation, how do those two things coexist? Well, you have to be able to freak the language, meaning that Harriet Tubman has to be able to talk to another enslaved African in a way, using English in a way that the slave master doesn't understand, even though she's using English. That's like a deep concept, right? So for example, even when we take the N-word, right, which we did an episode on Wild Black. I don't know if you guys saw that. You guys see Wild Black yet? Yes. Yeah, so like, we did an N-word episode on that. And so like, for example, just to give you an example of that, let's say back in the day, we're on a plantation, and let's say there's a slave master somewhere outside, right? And someone comes in here and they say, MK, that's me. They say, MK has escaped the plantation. And another enslaved African, now remember, in this room, it's only people who are enslaved. Outside this room, maybe there's some slave masters that could be listening. So someone says, MK escaped? Because you know I would have been out. MK escaped? Yeah, MK escaped. And then someone says, one of the enslaved people says, that's a bad nigga. Now, what is so interesting about that phrase is that the slave master is the one that introduced that word, nigger, right? And when the slave master hears the enslaved people saying that I am a bad nigger because I escaped, the slave master is going to say, yeah, that's right. He's a bad nigga because he escaped. The slave master is not going to understand that the enslaved are actually freaking the language. They don't mean that I'm bad. They mean that I'm fucking amazing. And it doesn't mean, and nigger doesn't mean what it was intended to mean. So bad nigga actually means I'm the shit. And it's true. And the slave master doesn't get it. The slave master is taking the words literally, bad nigger, and not getting that actually I'm being celebrated by the other enslaved. And one day, the slave master will realize what's going on. By that time, the enslaved will have created a whole new slang and new language, so they're not even talking like that anymore. It's like, bad meaning bad, but bad meaning good. People don't even talk like that anymore, right? But by the time that becomes mainstream or people catch on, it's no longer said, because so much of black art and black existence has been about, liberation. And as an artist, that's something I'm inspired by. In Buck, I talk about my journey as an artist, as a young man in Philly. I got into a lot of trouble. I saw a lot. I talk about it in the book. Death, destruction, drugs, all types of stuff. Things that, are still with me to this day, still have a traumatic effect. You saw my nephew is 19 years old in Philadelphia. You saw him on Wild Black. He's been shot 9 times. He's in the same streets that I was in when I was a young buck in Philly. So this stuff is very deep and personal to me. But I tell you all this to say that what changed my life is the blank page. Reading, writing, that's why this symposium to me means everything to me. I was kicked out of every school that I was in. I was constantly getting kicked out of schools and found myself in this alternative school. And that was the first time that I wrote. And that was also the time when I realized why, and I talk about this in the book, why reading was illegal for black people during slavery. Because I started to realize that we think in words, we self-vocalize, and the more that you have in your vocabulary, the more you can think about, right? So the expansion of your vocabulary, is in alignment with the expansion of, ideas in your mind and things that you can think about, and ideas that you can manifest. And so it changed my life, and the idea of language being liberating is, again, a part of the black experience. I'm going to say one more thing and then we want to get to some questions, because I know I'm probably running a little bit over, but good? All right. One more thing related to this whole language thing, and again, there's a lot that I'm missing, like not talking about from the book, just because the book deals with so much, but I kind of want to, you guys can ask specific questions if you want afterwards about the book, but the book deals with my mom's mental health issues. So my mom's journal my mom's diary is in the book. It's interspersed throughout the book. Her actual diary. My brother's prison letters are interspersed throughout the book. So when you read the book, it's not just my perspective, you're getting all these different perspectives, but the idea is, for me, that art should be emancipatory. And when I say that, I mean, back in the day, go back to slavery again, African American women, they used to make these quilts. And there were 4 things that they would do in these quilts that really stood out to me and have influenced me as an artist. The first thing is the quilts were incredibly resourceful, right? So, meaning we didn't have back in the day one big nice piece of silk or one big nice piece of cotton. All we had was scraps. So you get a piece of cotton from here, a piece of denim from here, a piece of, corduroy from here, all different scraps. And you unite these scraps to make something beautiful. So the first element to me that stands out about the quilt and the kind of artist that I want to be is an artist that is resourceful, an artist that maximizes minimal resources. Maximize the minimal, you know what I mean? And that's a part of the experience, right? Just because you don't have a lot doesn't mean you can't make something amazing, right? You work with what you have to make something amazing, right? So maximizing the minimal, right? The maximization of minimal resources. That's the first thing I noticed about these quilts. The second thing is the quilts are beautiful. Even with no resources, the aesthetics are top-notch, vibrant, vivid, powerful, beautiful. So again, I'm looking at this as the kind of artist that I want to be, right? I'm looking at history to kind of influence the kind of artist, the things that I want to do as an artist, right? I want to be resourceful. I want to be beautiful as an artist and have my work be up to the highest aesthetic standards. Also, the quilt is practical. It's not made to just be on a wall somewhere where no one sees it or uses it. The quilt is actually a piece of art that can make you warm. It can save your life in that way, right? You could be about to die of cold, being cold, and you get the quilt wrapped around you and now you're warm. So maybe not warm right away, but eventually you'll be all right. So the quilt has this practical power. And then the fourth thing about the quilt is that these women that made these quilts, they would often embed these symbols into the quilts. Now, if you didn't know what the symbols meant or you didn't know what you were looking for, you might just think it was a nice picture. But if you knew what was really going on, and we talked about language, right? If you were hip, the word hip comes from a Wolof word. Wolof is a language in West Africa. Many of our words, when we study the etymology, we see that they had these origins in other places. So the word hip is a Wolof word. The Wolof word is hippie, H-I-P-I. It means to open one's eyes and see. It's a term of enlightenment. So if you're a hippie, right? Now you see where things come from though, right? If you're hip or you're a hippie, if you're a hippie in Wolof, right? If you're hip, you know that those are not just random symbols. The symbols that these women would embed in the quilt were actually maps to show you how to get to the nearest safe house along the Underground Railroad. Maps to show you how to read the stars so that you could get free. So here you have a piece of art made by black women who were enslaved. They were enslaved. That was resourceful, beautiful, practical, and emancipatory. It could actually get you free. So that's what Buck is, right? Buck is something that, is resourceful and, using all the resources that I have as a writer, as a storyteller. I try to make it as beautiful as possible. Try to make it practical and useful, meaning that, when I go to the prisons, the brothers tell me, sisters tell me, this is something that has helped me in my journey. This is something that's helping me in my... So again, practical meaning, it's cool to write a nice book, but write a nice book that could do something for someone in a practical way, that could change your life in a practical way. And then emancipatory, right? Try to write something that can liberate the mind, liberate the thinking, liberate where someone might be, and connect people. So that's what I've tried to do with Buck. There's a lot of things about the specific story, about my life that I haven't really included. Some of you guys have read. If you want to ask questions about that, that's fine. If you want to ask questions about anything else, that's fine. You know, about writing, about process, about life, whatever it is. I kind of want to open it up to you now. I think I went over a little bit, but I have a lot more to say. But I'll be seeing you guys throughout the day. But if you guys have questions now, this is a good time to jump in.
Yeah, one of my favorite aspects of Buck is just all the references you made, especially to hip hop. A lot of what my generation considers, I guess, the classics. You made references to like MCs like RZA, Nas, Tupac. What's your favorite Nas song?
My favorite Nas joint? My favorite Nas joint would be it's on that one of them. It's called Testify.
Yeah.
It's on Untitled album. It's like only a minute long. It's crazy. It's just a minute long, but he's just on one. He's talking. He's in his bag. Yeah, that's a Philly. We created that in Philly too. When you hear people say in his bag, that comes from Philly. Just so you know. But yeah, but being in your bag means like you are really like, it's like being in the zone. You know what I mean? When you watch a great basketball player who's in the zone, like Nas was in his bag in that song. Like he said things in those songs that he probably wouldn't say in another situation. And he could do it again. You know, music is like, they say it's like frozen, you know, or they say architecture is frozen music, right? But it's like he's taking this moment and he probably won't say that ever again in that moment. But in that moment, he said it. That's just a powerful song. I like that song.